Is Rob going to join us? Rob Jeffers.
He did ask for the invitation, so I would imagine. If not, I can provide an update in lieu. All
right. So let's jump in. This is the Wednesday, April 13th, regularly scheduled meeting of the Cohasset Affordable Housing Trust being held virtually. My fond hope is that maybe the May meeting will be held in person, ending 2 years of arm's length transactions. And we'll open the meeting with a roll call to ascertain a quorum, starting with Cindy Matheson.
Cindy Matheson, present.
Rob Henry.
Rob Henry, present.
Tom Mead.
Mead, here.
And Steve Gomer. We have a quorum of 4 of 7 of our trustees. We are expecting the attendance of 1 more. If you've got the agenda in front of you, and if it looks like I'm giving you all the side eye, that's not the case. I'm looking at the agenda on a different screen. The Affordable Housing Steering Committee update is to be delivered by Rob Jeffers, although since he's not here and Lauren is offered, would you hit the highlights there, Lauren?
Certainly. So I'll quickly run down the list of sort of our affordable development projects throughout town. 808 Jerusalem Road, they've gotten their preliminary approval from DHCD to proceed with the comprehensive permit process. So they have filed with the zoning board and they'll be starting in May with the zoning board for the local permitting process. So that's moving along. We have 147 South Main. Per my last update, the permit had kind of been in jeopardy due to a lapse of time that had passed. The applicant has, with legal counsel and John Hallen, worked through the process and is reapplying and has confirmed that they're still eligible to move forward as they were permitted. So that is still moving along now. 390 Cjc Highway. They are in the process of securing their sewer and street opening permits for Cjc Highway 3A, which is a state highway and involves the state departments. They did just recently have their fire marshal exam. They had to do some sort of repair to the sprinkler system, but that's in progress. So they're moving along. 1 Pleasant Street, the new owner is continuing to develop as was permitted under planning board. They're waiting on their demolition, but at this point they still have tenants with leases through May. So they need to wait for that to conclude so that they can then begin their demolition process. And then let me think. 124 and 87 Elm Street. There are 4 offsite units associated with that project. And I heard just recently from DHCD, they're in sort of their final stages of legal counsel review for that process. They have a couple more things to sort of tighten up, but it seems that that's making progress as well. And once that's approved by DHCD, they will immediately be ready to sort of do the lottery for those units and have those SHI eligible.
Is that the CHP inclusionary zoning?
Yes, they had a 3-unit requirement and they're supplying 4 over on an offsite location. It was an existing 4-unit building that they're doing the deed restrictions on.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And that is it. The Affordable Housing Steering Committee at this stage is also doing their next fiscal year goal planning. So they're in the process of sort of picking some priority initiatives to sort of tackle for the next fiscal year.
Okay. Tommy, go ahead.
Very quickly, Lauren, I'm sorry. So I'm just taking notes on my little pipeline tracker and I missed your South Main Street update. Can you just run that back for me really quickly?
Yes. So they, at a certain point, had been sort of in limbo. It had been a certain time had elapsed and their permit was in expiration. So there was a concern that they were no longer eligible for that use that was pre-existing. At this point, through legal counsel, the applicant and John Hallen working together, they have confirmed that they're going to reapply and are still eligible for that. So this will be moving forward as was originally permitted through
as the 3 units of Resi 1 will be affordable. So we get credit for all 3.
Correct. There are apartment rental units and it's above, it's a mixed use complex, small scale.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
Rob Henry.
Yeah. On going back to the whatever it is, number 37 CG Chief Justice. I thought it was, of course, the problem was he did all the building and all without the proper sewage and water. And I thought that was approved. Why is that still hanging on that? What did you say? They're still waiting?
They're running the sewer line down 3A. in order to open the streets to run the sewer line down 3A, they've got to get state permits because that's not town property.
I understand that, but there are not sewer lines going down 3A?
No.
In that section? Okay.
No, this has been the primary issue with the development over time. They had a valid septic permit that was then later revoked.
Yeah.
That caused plenty of contention, but their proposed solution out of all of that was to hook up the sewer. That took, Lauren would know better than me, but I think that took close to 18 months to get that resolved.
Yes, that's a fair approximation.
And once they got it resolved, they said the cost of laying the line belongs to the developer.
Yeah.
Okay.
I understand that.
So the project itself, while much of the design could take place prior to the approval, pending an approval, once the line siting was approved, they found that the best approach was to go down 3A, which is a separate permitting process.
Okay, so I guess then the question is that because he has the approval and it's all in process, is he not allowed to proceed on construction of the building?
Lauren is a better person to answer that.
So I believe he is still actively working on the building. The other comment that we had was the fire marshal exam took place and there's a repair to the sprinkler line. So that's in progress. So he's still making progress on the building, but he's not eligible for a certificate of occupancy until all of these permits
Of course not.
pieces are checked off.
That's
So maybe I'm misunderstanding your question, Rob.
Well, because he kind of curtailed construction based on the fact that, he didn't have the water and the sewer squared away. And we all said, I can't believe how far he went without having that squared away. So then when it was finally addressed, and then now the situation, the water is the water been connected?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I'm talking to Laura because I figure she might know more, but.
I'm not certain of that specific level of detail.
Because
This has been it's been a drawn out process. There's been multiple pieces and
Right.
levels of jurisdiction, but the applicant, it's their burden to continue to move this along. So it's not something that the town has been
Yeah.
holding up for any particular reason. We're working with the applicant in the speed that's possible and needs to happen.
I don't believe the water is connected
It
right
is-
now because there's no place to put
There's
wastewater.
2 affordable units associated with that, right?
There's,
No, there's
3.
5.
Oh, it's gonna be 5. Yeah, that's okay. I don't have my notes in front of me, sorry. But I'm just, only from our standpoint of the getting units on board, the more he can be doing, obviously it's closer to when we're gonna have those 5 units.
There
So
are 5
that's-
affordable,
right.
but 25 that count against SHI.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, Rob, it's in everybody's interest, the towns and the developer, to get those units, get a certificate of occupancy on the entire building, but on those units in particular as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the capital that's tied up in that at the moment. All right. I asked for a very quick insertion in the agenda of a topic not anticipated 48 hours in advance. So the chair is making the motion. Can I have a second?
Second,
Okay. Motion made and seconded by roll. Cindy Matheson,
Cindy Matheson, aye.
Rob Henry,
Rob Henry, aye.
Tom Mead, David Pfeiffer.
David Pfeiffer, aye.
And Steve Gomer, aye. And the item at hand is actually it's more of a question for Lauren, but it arose in a separate conversation for me a day ago, and I want to find out a little bit more information surrounding it. Lauren, I understand that there's a proposed zoning bylaw that would change the notion of a conforming lot. Is that the case? And do I understand it correctly? And if so, could you explain what it is so that the trust understands it?
So I'm a bit perplexed by your question because I can confirm that there are no zoning articles going to this annual town meeting. There's no
Okay.
zoning on the docket. There's been iterations in the past that could sort of impact the single lot exemption, for example, was something that was considered for a special town meeting in December. So it's something that was considered. It ultimately never came back. So I'm unable to speak to the specifics of what that was, unless it was in reference to something that had been looked at in the past.
Okay, well, first of all, again, Tom, I see your hand, so you're right up. I just so that you all know, I heard this unrelated to anything that affordable housing is doing. I heard from a developer in my neighborhood that this was put forward. I was unaware of it, but having heard about it yesterday and his description of what it was, it could have an impact on affordable housing, as was described to me, which is the reason I asked you about it. Now, Tom, I'm sorry, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, are you referring to the driveway rules?
No, the description that the developer had given me was that a conforming lot would change in its square footage requirement from, I think it's what, 20,000 square feet now for residential A, is that right?
So I have my table of area regulations behind me, so I can confirm that in a moment, but I can confirm that there's nothing currently being considered or brought forward at this time to change dimensional regulations. In the future, perhaps.
I understand.
Yeah.
And so again, secondhand information, and that's my caveat. So that's my escape hatch. Okay. But the description was that it would change that conforming lot requirement from 20,000 square feet to 35,000 square feet.
So again, I can't confirm the language that he's speaking about, just so people are on the same page. Residence A district is our smallest. It's 18,000 as a minimum. Residence B is 35. Residence C is 60,000. There's an extensive amount of information that actually shows you that about 60% of our lots in town are non-conforming to some degree, whether it's square footage, dimensional things. So, you know, while there's been sort of like kicking the tires on like, could we change dimensional regulations? A lot of study would need to go into doing anything, because as it is, we sort of have this interesting puzzle piece. It's a conversation that I can't say will never come forward, but right now there's nothing moving forward to change zoning on our dimensional standards right now.
Fair enough. Look, as I said, I received this as pass along information. My concern was that if it were factual in any way, because I hadn't seen it in the draft warrant, that it would have an impact on affordable housing. So with that, Lauren points out that in fact there is, excuse me, there is no such item on the warrant for annual town meeting. Let's table this discussion and move on to the regular agenda. And that actually goes to Lauren, a discussion of the MBTA multifamily housing legislation draft guidelines for compliance.
Thank you. Yes. So I conducted the first presentation before the select board with an overview. I circulated that information that really just sort of gave a summary level of what we're looking at. The regulations are really, there's a draft guidelines for compliance that's been set forth by DHCD, so that MBTA communities, as designated by the statute, need to come into compliance with a certain minimum number of multifamily housing units by right through zoning. Currently in town, we don't have any multifamily by right in any of our districts. So that right alone tells us that we need to change some sort of our zoning to come into compliance. There's a series of other caveats and sort of concerns layered into the regulations as they are, that are of great concern for our sort of scale of a community. So what we did was the select board wrote on behalf of the town a list of concerns. There's two-page letter that was circulated. I also sent that out. It's available on our website. We had in between March 22nd and the following week when I returned for the letter, we did receive public comment. It was actually really interesting, the public comment we got from the community. It was sort of, I got 3 specific emails that were really just a stoplight. You had people saying this is utter insanity. I would rather see the MBTA leave our town. You had people in the sort of really in the middle of the road saying, well, I think there's merits to what they're trying to achieve here, but we need to take a look at what this means for us. As it is right now, this doesn't seem to make sense. And then we had people just saying, we absolutely need this kind of housing. We need diversity. Please bring it on. So it's really interesting. So I think from that, it sort of shows our community is going to have a broad perspective on this. With that said, I think there are merits to what the state is trying to do. We do recognize even in our own town, we've been proactive. We identify on our housing production plan that we need to diversify our housing stock. But with that said, it just needs to be of scale that's reasonable to the community. So that's really sort of the sentiment that the select board took in the response to the state, is that we're willing to work with you, diversify our housing stock, continue to be proactive about housing as we have been, but it needs to be something that's attainable, because right now we're sort of, the bars that they're setting are just, it's unattainable. So that is sort of the sentiment at this point. we're working, there's sort of a temporary compliance window. We have to submit a couple of pieces of information. We're 2/3 of the way there, and I'm working with engineering to get that last piece submitted. It's really just in terms of mapping parcel information. And then there is a period of, as set out in the draft guidelines, we would have through the end of this calendar year to put forth a plan of action as to how we would come into compliance. And then we would have through the end of calendar year 2024 to adopt said regulations. With that said, we're kind of in this interesting holding pattern right now, because we know from our peers and regional planners in the area that DHCD received an overwhelming amount of comment, and a lot of people sort of critiquing, pointing out flaws. So I'm really interested, and we're all sort of waiting to see how DHCD responds to the comment period. With that said, we have a temporary plan to move forward. And at this point, we don't really, we need to keep this on our radar. But we're hoping within the next, hopefully month or two, we'll hear from DHCD with some further guidelines, a change or something, or even hopefully even an extension of time, because it's going to be pretty tough to come up with a plan to meet what they're saying are requirements by the end of this calendar year if they don't change anything. So that in a nutshell is where we stand. I will continue to keep you updated as I hear more, and I see a couple people have comments.
Okay, Cindy.
Go ahead,
Cindy. Go ahead. No, you go ahead, Cindy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I go ahead.
I was just going to say, to follow up briefly on what Lauren was saying, the MMLA has also submitted comments to these drafts, and I can confirm the sentiment that is being expressed among a lot of communities is it's a great idea, it's a good plan, but the regulations really are a little bit over the top and not really taking into account the realities and sizes of particular communities. So we're all a little bit optimistic that what we see now will not be what we end up with. That being said, it's all yours, Cindy.
When I read the letter, it mentioned that there were no affordable housing requirements in any of this. Is it any chance that might be included going forward?
That was a major criticism that I've heard echoed throughout the planning community. And I think, hopefully the state responds to that. I'm actually really surprised that that wasn't already addressed. But with that said, just the fact that it's silent on it, it doesn't mean that we can't include that.
Sure.
So with our response, no matter what, I think it's a great opportunity to incorporate, some affordable housing goals. And I know the steering committee is interested in that as well, having that conversation. We already have inclusionary zoning throughout town. Any residential project 5 units or more has a 10% requirement, but this could be an opportunity to do an even deeper affordability level, a greater percentage, mixed income. There's all sorts of creative approaches. So that's why I'm hopeful that ultimately something good will come from this. But like we're all I think on the same page that the way it's sort of framed right now, it just really doesn't make sense.
And just to add to that, and it's a conversation for a later meeting, is from what I learned in all those wonderful seminars you sent us, that we can go ahead, aside from the SHI, we can use some of our funds to determine like 120% of affordable housing. Even it doesn't qualify in SHI, but we could use that as workforce housing or elder or whatever we wanted. So there does seem to be a big window if we do go forward with that for affordable housing to jump in.
Yes.
Tom Mead.
Thank you. Specific to the, I only was able to scan the letter. Very quick question, clarification for me, please. So did I understand, because when I read the MBTA stuff a few weeks ago, I thought it was just percentage, but do I read this right, that it's percentage or a minimum 750? So like Cohasset's supposed to provide 750 units?
Correct. There is a blanket minimum of 750.
All right. So that's obviously, we'll get pushed back hard, right? From guys like us.
Yes.
Anyways. So, okay. And then, so my second question might be more, possibly deeper discussion, future meeting. I would benefit from some recap of like what the various proposals and steps have been made by Cohasset and rebuffed by the state as far as the work along 3A, right? Because this affects everything in town, literally everything. I'm sure Master Planning Committee and everybody else has been hard at work at this for a long time. Would this be a place where we can use leverage, right? The state's coming to us and saying, hey, you have to do X, Y, Z, and we're going to go back to them and you do this in your letter already. But can we do it more forcefully? And can I understand like what what has already been proposed and dismissed with regard to, pedestrian stuff specifically, I guess, along 3A? Because to me, that's the way to approach this. There's a lot of flexibility, the way I understand it, in the MBTA requirements, and it sounds like even more will be built in. So as far as solving our transportation hub issues here in town, to me, it's going to be along the 3A corridor. That's the natural fix. And so let's, again, I would benefit from hearing the, historical stuff. We don't have to get into that today. But I'd love to hear what has been proposed in the past. What has the state shot down? And can we use this as a wrench, as a lever now with the state to get what we need along 3A? What are your thoughts on that, Lauren?
Yes, I absolutely think that's a great angle to take. And I think that's like one of the criticism pieces that we tried to address, because it didn't make sense the way that they're saying that if you can't count the land, if you don't already have the infrastructure to unlock it, it's like, if you don't already have it to support it, we're going to bar you from the very programs that you need to get that grant money. And it's like, that is counterintuitive. That's one of the solutions I'm hoping that they'll address, because I think if they'll expand that and allow us, then we become more competitive for these grant programs to unlock that. Because it's like, that's one of the, another thing is like, no matter what, it's like, if you're going to give an unfunded mandate to all these communities, then you need to put the resources and assets behind it to allow them to do it. Because as it is right now, every time there's a grant ask, no matter what program it is, it's like you have a, $100 million ask for, $20 billion worth of funding. And it's like, it's just not, and that's like one of the feedback items that we gave in the community forum, also in addition to the letter, was that we need resources, technical assistance, funding for this. So I think it's definitely, I'd be happy to sort of pull together the history, because I can think of a couple of programs already that have been sort of like failed grant attempts, just due to, the competitive programs, but there's a lot more, I'm sure, that even predate my history here.
Yeah, my understanding is like we don't control 3A, so we've proposed stoplights or sidewalks or this or that, but like we have no control over that. It hasn't been well received by the state. And so let's, I understand you automatically go to the grant programs and the money, but I'm just saying, even from a how we're going to work together standpoint, it seems to me like this is like a good potential kind of like, inflection point to say, all right, let's figure this out once and for all. Let's get some I'm literally looking out here. My office looks right over 3A, and I'm going, let's get some sidewalks out here.
Fully agree.
Yeah. Tom, a couple of things. First of all, I've had several conversations with our state senator, and I know the elected boards have had direct interaction with both the senator and our representative, both of whom have said the same thing. The empowering statute that calls for these regulations, and remember, these are draft regulations. The empowering statute effectively is counter in its intent to what the regulation is proposing. So there's not only has the town responded in writing, but the legislators are corralling a variety of other towns who are in a similar situation. This is fine if you're someplace along a train line, possibly out in Westboro where there is land. But if you draw the circle, we're missing two things. We're missing land, and we're missing wastewater. And so the possibility of doing anything right now beyond just the 3A access is minimal. We might as well just excise ourselves from grants as it is. And which leads me to my second point. When did you ever think that the MBTA and logic belonged in the same sentence? Okay. This is it's hard to figure out what their purpose is, except that maybe they handed this off to a college intern and said, hey, draw something up, because there is nothing here that makes a lot of sense for most of the towns in Eastern Massachusetts. Anyway, are we good with this topic for the moment? Ted?
Can I add one thing? And I'm so sorry, everybody, for being a little late this morning. I asked Lauren to put this on the agenda for us, but just to throw an additional monkey in a complicated barrel. One of the things we ought to think about is discussing with the state, if this does move along, the use or to acquire some of their surplus property. So we're not alone as a community, but for instance, they'll never tell you it's surplus, but it has always been surplus. But the parcel of land behind the medical building up above 3A, which is a large parcel, is in the eyes of the state's transportation agency a surplus asset. So we ought to think about, and just this is a broader discussion for the town, is if this thing gets more legs and starts growing, the first to the barrel can be heard the loudest. So we ought to think about having a discussion in town about going to the state. If you're going to give us this thing, give us also the resources to do it, which is will back to us some of the state parcels. And there are other state parcels, and there's some that we have. So for instance, the corner of Pond Street, the old gardening thing 3 years ago, Steve reminded me the town bought that. DPW has been always thinking about maybe somewhere else or whatever. So maybe with the ability to acquire some other land from the state, some of the land that the town has can be repositioned for housing affordability. I don't know the answer to that, but we ought to like have it on the table as one of those things we want to discuss with them, because at some point many towns will fight, and I get it, but a lot of towns that I think can also look at it as an opportunity could in part maybe get some stuff. So that's a large parcel we ought to put on the table again for further discussion. Really, it's a broader discussion at the town, but I think that there are some of these that are not under conservation, that are state assets that can be, reconfigured or something. So they're not our land now. Again, it is about 3A, but we ought to be like just keeping that in our mind to think about what is possible.
Ted, hold for just a second, because that is an item on the agenda.
Okay. Oh, did I jump ahead? See, that's what happens when you come late. Sorry about that.
But it does. There's a dovetail here between the previous conversation and this. Tom made the point earlier that this might be a strong inflection point to finally address how 3A is managed, because that is where future development possibilities still reside. And that the piece you have is adjacent to 3A, and so it would be likewise involved. It's worthwhile, in my opinion, to start to explore both items, right? Tom, the idea that this might be a good inflection point, and frankly, I'm not sure where that starts. Maybe it starts with our legislators. Maybe it starts with a conversation with DOT. And the larger question is that something that we can lead as a discussion as the trust, or is that really something that needs to be left to the elected officials? And the short answer is I suspect that that might be left with the elected officials, which that's an important consideration, because strategically remember that the Board of Selectmen turn over every year. In other words, there's potential for a new member every year, and as a result, there's a potential for change of heart, change of view, etc. Okay, but that doesn't mean it's not worth pursuing. And secondly, the same question applies with what Ted's brought up. If we have an eye to and we covet existing state lands that may be surplus to the state's needs, what's the best approach there? And Cindy Amara, I'll ask you, is the best approach to bring that forward as a proposal to the selectmen, because that sort of land issue typically falls in their lap? Or is it to try to effectively construct an arranged transaction with the state using our own resources and contacts, and ask the Board of Selectmen, if it ever comes to completion, to bless it?
You're not going to like my answer. It either way can work. It depends on the amount of money, the size of the parcel, and the appetite for acquiring the property. I do know of situations in other cities and towns where I work where there is cooperative workings going on with MBTA, and the city where they did some sort of land arrangement so that there is some sort of affordable housing project multi-use going on. So it is possible to determine whether or not it should start with you or with legislatures or the select board. I think that's going to be at the topic of a more in-depth conversation, and maybe one that if you're going to discuss value of property can be done in executive session. I think you need to get a sense of what the property is you're looking at first. And then I think you need to get a sense of what the political landscape is in terms of where you might have the most support initially. It might be a cooperative effort where you might do some of the legwork so you can bring almost this done deal, so to speak, to the town so that they don't have to go, oh my God, what do we have to do? It's sort of packaged for them. And I don't have enough information or enough read on what would make the most sense, but I do think that there is a lot of room and any of those options can work. I think it's too soon to tell in a nutshell.
Nope, that's fine. And Ted, is there any indication that the parcel that you're thinking about is, I mean, the state might be willing to consider disposing of it?
So I think, well, you know, I haven't been involved in those discussions in a while. However, when I was on the select board, it was something that came up from time to time. And at that time, it was deemed, it was in the eyes of the state that that was surplus. They were redoing the Salt and Stall building Salt and Stall Bridge in Boston, and they were storing materials up there. Hadn't been used actually effectively in a while. I talked to a couple of people at the state about broadly surplus land on another matter, and they're actually open to discussions about how to more effectively use state surplus land. So I think there is probably political will in the executive branch to talk about that. And I guess I don't have an opinion in town, but I think if we're going to get forced with one of these, another unfunded mandate or unattainable mandate, if we think creatively about it, we could actually get some additional resources we might be able to use. That's the way I look at it. So I don't mind them, Lauren. Yeah, I don't mind them having it. Yeah.
I just,
Lauren, before you go ahead, just be aware that I purposely want to keep this conversation at the moment vague, not describing specifically any particular parcel, because anything like that, I think probably should be done in executive session. All right. And since this is a conceptual conversation, I think we leave it there. That's just, I'm saying this as a caution to everybody. Lauren?
I retract my point.
Okay, thank you. It's worthwhile, in my opinion, to schedule some time for executive session for next meeting. So that we can maybe discuss this with a little bit more clarity. In the meantime, Ted, I know you've got a number of contacts at the state level. It may be worthwhile to kick a tire. And likewise, I would bring this to the town manager to start with, to ask what sort of appetite the town might have to engage with it.
I'm on it.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. We had request of transfer for land. We went before the selectmen once again. Very pleased to announce that the selectmen, of course, as you may know, voted for the land transfer, both parcels, in a unanimous vote. That then went forward to advisory committee, who likewise voted in the affirmative. I think it was 7-0 with one abstention. Unfortunately, we didn't learn about the appearance on the agenda until the day of for advisory committee. So there was no one from the Affordable Housing Trust there to support the item. Although I do have to give a shout out to Patrick Kennedy, Diane Kennedy's husband, who was conversant with with the proposal, and apparently made a strong case for moving forward. So next step here is annual town meeting. I respectfully request that each of you put it on your calendar, Monday evening, May 9th, since you'll have ripped it up at Mother's Day. Is that right? Monday, May 9th?
Second.
Monday, May 2nd. Oh, yikes. Monday, May 2nd. Since you'll have ripped it up on, no, you wouldn't have, because Mother's Day is the following weekend. You have no excuse, right? Could use your vote. This is one of those items, I believe, if I recall correctly, it's got to pass by 2/3 in order to make the land transfer. I don't believe that it'll be all that controversial, but nonetheless, I'd rather not leave it to chance.
Do we know yet, is the town meeting going to be live?
Lauren
Yes, it will be at the high school.
and Cindy, did you have something?
I was going to ask quickly, do we need to plan to have people in the audience to make statements in support of if there is any controversy that comes up?
It never hurts. It never hurts. Be prepared to speak. I mean, as all of you know, I never shy away from a microphone. But the fact of the matter is that it's always useful to have a range of voices in support. So that's absolutely.
Can we get a little summary of this situation? It will be in the agenda for the town meeting?
It'll be in the agenda. It's I think Article 14. I could be wrong about that. The final order gets juggled around a bit until the warrant is sent out. But
it's the only thing like that on the agenda. I take it.
Well, it's the only land transfer that I know of.
Yeah. Okay.
So, okay.
It's a question, is it the best use of the land? And we are arguing, yes, this is the best use of the land for the town.
Right. I mean, the finer points of this are as follows. Exactly as Cindy points out, highest and best use has been the governing principle for use of town property. And highest and best use in this case is, in our opinion, both helping to fund or promote affordable housing objectives, which, by the way, out of all the things that exist in town, there are only two things that we're required to do. One is balance our books, and the other one is obey state laws. And in terms of obeying state laws, look, we aren't required to build a new high school, and we aren't required to put lights over the baseball field, and we aren't required to do a lot of things, but we are required to provide for affordable housing. Okay.
Where's the location of this?
Say that again.
The location of this transfer?
The location.
It's the lots at Heather Drive and Mill Lane that we've talked about.
Both. Okay, so it's more than just one. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And the other piece of this is that highest and best use would return both of these parcels to the town tax rolls. Currently, they're non-productive assets. Okay. All right, Ted, you missed this my announcement. I've got a hard stop at 9:30 this morning, so I'm going to ask when I have to go. Would you mind taking over?
Sure.
Finishing out the agenda,
No problem.
and because of that, I just want to jump ahead on the next item, which is the goals and updates. The fiscal year 23 goals and updates. With respect to the finance plan, I intend to produce something for all of us to look at, but following town meeting and with this vote. But ultimately, what the plan is that I would like to present to you is twofold. One is addressing balance sheet, right? My objective here is to build our asset base in the near term to about $1.5 million. We should, after this meeting, so long as both the CPC funding passes and these transfers take place, we should have about $1 million, a little bit better than $1 million in cash reserves. And I hope I'm being conservative in estimating the value of the property at over $500,000. There would be $1.5 million. The basis for this is, from a financial standpoint, I want to be able to allow the trust to leverage its balance sheet. And by leveraging it, I'm talking about a number of things. One, if you have land, then you can certainly leverage that into development. And secondly, as you've heard me talk about in the past, and I was hoping to hear from Rob on this, I think we can help a developer, in this case, forgive me, I'm drawing a blank all of a sudden. Habitat. We can help Habitat jumpstart their construction by simply guaranteeing a construction loan, or if you will, using our fund to stand behind a construction loan, advancing the construction on that property. And my thought process here in this case is that if we begin to show tangible progress, then I believe that the support for our efforts continue onward. Now, again, the proposal's been brought forward informally to the local chapter by way of Rob Jeffers. And the last I heard was that the local president was going back to her board to find out whether or not that was something that they wanted to pursue. My thought behind this is it would free them up to still do their fundraising, but ideally it could advance the project. Right now, I don't foresee, because the fundraising hasn't even started yet, to the best of my knowledge, I don't see breaking ground before 18 months based upon their current plan. And that to me is just not logical. Okay. So again, the broad outline of the financing plan is to build the balance sheet, and with that balance sheet construction, give us the capability to act in a variety of methods and ways that can advance, or in many cases expedite development or projects. So thank you. It's a lot of verbiage. I'll field questions, but I'll have to do it afterwards. I do have to go. I've got a conference here I'm supposed to be attending. Ted, would you mind terribly taking over? You got to get off mute to do it, though. Lower left-hand corner, Ted.
I got it. I'm a little slow this morning.
All right, guys, thank you
Thanks.
very much. As I said, I'm hoping that our next meeting will be live. So that would be the May meeting. That's the goal. And in the meantime, thank you for your time.
Okay, take care, Steve. Okay, I think next is asset discussion with Rob and Tom. Anything new?
So apologies, guys. I missed the last meeting. I had forwarded to Rob an Excel sheet. I thought what I would do is just pull it up on the screen so you can have a look at what it is. We talked about, we have these open meeting issues, and I don't think this thing wants to be, circulated among the group. The idea here is I'll be, between me and Rob, we'll be sort of keeper of the document. And then we can just use it to have, a specific pipeline list of projects that we make sure we're tracking the progress and next steps of. So let me go ahead and pull this
I might
up.
point out at the beginning too, that Tom and I've talked in between meetings, and we want to make sure that we have a rolling plan and an update, so that there's things happening during the month, we'd like to know about it. We're going to try to keep everything on track as best as possible, because we know we have a lot of delays on these things, and this way we can all be up to date on a continual category. Okay, situation.
So you see, it's nothing too fancy. I'm literally just listing the projects down. Counting up the total units in the projects, number of actual affordable units, what we get credit for in the SHI, AHT commitment. This will be more and more important as we start to take the steps, that Steve is talking about, which I really like and support. As you can see, we only have $85,000 in commitments right now. So we certainly could step up and make some additional commitment, be it a soft grant or a potentially forgivable loan or an actual loan that we expect to get back on 808 Jerusalem, for example. So again, nothing, nothing groundbreaking here, not too fancy, but something that, I think will help us instead of just, sort of haphazardly as we get updates inter-month on a particular project or another, like if we can just keep in our mind, okay, here are the 6, 7 things that are actually approved and in process. And then I'll start to keep, like you see down the bottom here, I have these 2 confidential addresses. This is the town-owned land that we had looked at with the Affordable Housing Steering Committee. There are a couple of parcels that we decided not to immediately pursue. But I'd be very interested to keep up the conversation on the one that's behind Shaw's as this 3A corridor discussion, ensues. I think there's some pretty cool stuff and some things we should kind of keep on the radar. So again, we're not gonna like distribute this internally. We don't want to be messing around with open meeting laws. I'll keep it, and I think what we can do is just flash it on the screen. On the monthly meetings that we want to have specific updates. This allows us to, just run through it real quick.
Sounds great. Anybody have any questions? Cindy?
I'm thinking, sorry, I'm thinking ahead. So I have a question on an open meeting. Not the whole thing, as you said, Tom, but obviously some parts kept confidential. But is this the kind of thing, for example, if we create a website that we could have up and open and transparent so that people in other committees and then the town know exactly what the status is of all of these things at any one time?
From my perspective, I don't see why not. Everything I have highlighted here, these have already been discussed in open meetings, have been approved by vote. So I don't see any reason why, as you guys develop your communication plan, this can't be some version of this can certainly be shared.
I think that would be a critical thing to keep the rest of the town informed. And so my question was to Lauren, is that okay to do that?
Yes, as long as it's publicly accessible information. All these things, I mean, our meetings are open to the public. This is all information that's accessible. So the only thing, the caveat that we have when we put information on is just has to be in PDF form. So it's not like publicly editable. But I would ask Tom, if you don't mind, could I have a copy of this? Because I can use this to update you more easily and sort of giving you updates.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
And then Lauren, if actually, Tom, why don't we have both our emails so Lauren can send it to both of us, and that way you and I don't have to go back and forth.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, I'll get the 3 of us on a chain. Yep.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any questions for Rob and Tom?
Cindy Amara has her hand up.
Cindy, yep, go ahead, Cindy.
The only thing I would suggest is you may want to have, and maybe I just missed you saying this, 2 versions. One that includes information that is public and accessible that you can use as a communication piece. And then one that includes things that are more in the developmental stage from your perspective, as opposed to physically along the way publicly.
Yeah, so if so this is what I would include as public, like the most basic. So our status comments would be to the side, and these down here that aren't, that we're just kicking these around at the moment. So, but everything in this gray box, I believe, is all public knowledge anyways.
Yep.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be okay to even put that last item, since there really is no information, but it just shows, it just enlarges what we're looking at? Is there some problem with that, anybody?
Yeah, I would say no, not to post it. I think, depending on what the balance of Cindy's, sort of communication plan is, I think we can describe it, here are the other things we're looking at. But, well, I don't know, that's just personal preference. I just track the things on an Excel sheet like this. I track, what's actually approved and being worked on. And then the rest is, sort of softer updates on pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Anybody else, any other questions? No? Okay. Next, I want to thank Cindy so much for covering my bacon on this communication plan. She's really been doing a great job with this. Thank you very much. Cindy, do you mind to go through it?
So in the last meeting, I just sent out, it's really rough ideas about what we would be thinking of that we want to share with the town, or that we ideally want everybody on every related committee to know, in terms of the general information we want to send out, and then how we get feedback in, as well as specific information to particular committees or stakeholders. The thing that I updated is the last page, which is like a 5th page, and it's based on, I sat through the 4 seminars that Lauren sent us, which I can highly recommend, especially numbers 2 and 4, because there was great information coming in from other town municipal housing authority, municipal affordable housing trusts, particularly in places like Wellfleet, that is a little bit different, but in some ways is similar to the problems that we have to deal with. And the things that really came across is transparency is absolutely critical. And almost all of the towns that are effective have already set up a website for their affordable housing trusts in order to start to communicate what's going on, and be able to constantly update and share what the status is. So there are 2, what I did was then look at, if we were to create a website, what would we want on it? And it essentially includes the stuff that had been mentioned before, like our mission statement, what our balance sheet is, what the pipeline is, and so forth. And then the second piece is, how do we expand communications across the town committees? For example, when we went to talk with CPC, it was clear that they don't quite understand the dynamic, I think, that we're working with, or not all of the members do. Certainly the committee chair does, but other people are looking at it much more discreetly in terms of this particular project, and we want updates on how this particular project is going on a day-to-day basis. They don't have the idea about what something like Steve just discussed in terms of how do we leverage our balance sheet in order to move projects along by guaranteeing construction loans and so forth. So one of the things that other towns have done effectively is bring people onto their board. Either they create their affordable housing trust with members from other stakeholder committees, like their CPC committee or their advisory committee or their housing authority. I don't know that we're thinking about that, but we might want to consider having maybe 1 or 2 members from the committees that are involved, whether it's like advisory. We didn't get an update in time to know that we should have been there to talk about the land transfer. If someone on advisory, for example, were sitting in on our meetings, then they would be at least familiar with what's going on. As just like Rob Jeffers comes in to update us, maybe we need to think about expanding across some of the other committees. Those are 2 of the kind of best practices that I took away from there. So I added them in for consideration in this communications plan. But clearly having a website as a locus of where being able to communicate with people and give the links to the various projects or committee discussions seems to be key. I don't know how to build a website. So I'm going to ask if the town can help us do that. I'm happy to facilitate getting it there, but I've got, there's no way I can know what to do to build a website. So go ahead, Lauren.
So this is perfect segue to let you know that we had our communications and engagement specialist start on Monday. His name is Justin Schreier. He comes to us from literally a TV like anchor background. So he is plugging in, he's starting to meet all of us. I'm actually looking forward to meeting him this week and sort of plugging him into all the planning initiatives. But I'd like to introduce you to him because he's got a lot of really cool dynamic ideas. He's going to be collaborating like across town departments, communicating different programs and helping us with our website and improving things. So I think this would be a perfect match to introduce you to Justin and see how he can help us meet these goals.
That sounds fabulous because I can dive into tons of details, and my problem is trying to bring it up to a higher level that makes sense. And
yes,
he's the expert in that regard. Then I would love to be able to meet with him and help push this forward.
Absolutely. I'll introduce you.
That's great. Questions, comments, concerns from anyone?
Lost in all of the verbiage.
I know, it's great. We welcome anybody who wants to help us with, with this. So feel free if you are so inclined. Cindy, thank you. Thank you very much.
But I will say key to this is this idea of the pipeline. And as Steve pointed out, both of those things, being able to communicate that in Steve's plan for finance, I think would really help everybody else in town understand what's going on and make it easier when we're trying to, ask CPC for funding, et cetera.
Completely agree. Okay, Steve talked briefly about the finance issue. Anybody have any questions on that? No? Okay, then our next meeting date is May 11th. Lauren, is there any reason you think we might need to get together before town meeting for any reason?
Not that I anticipate at this point. I think you pretty much know what the plan is. There's no further meetings to discuss. So, unless anything sort of comes up and you need to throw something together, other than that, I think we could plan to meet May 11th.
Okay, that sounds good. So town meeting on May 2nd, everyone, if you can join. I think I saw the minutes. Did we have minutes today from March 9th?
I sent them, so to you, Ted, they were on the list of attachments that Lauren sent, but I can see there's still some yellow marks that I wasn't certain of, and I needed to clarify. If
Okay,
you wanted to go through those yellow marks that are on the draft minutes, then we could potentially approve them if they're corrected.
Just gonna step off for 1 sec. I wasn't here last week anyway, so.
okay. Can everybody take a second to just look at the minutes, and if you like more time, we can push it off to the 11th.
Yeah, I wasn't here for last meeting either.
Okay. I'm just pulling them up here. Let's see. Why don't we have a quick, that way we can just sort of get these things posted up so we can.
Yeah, but my two questions were on page 3 and page 4, and they're highlighted in yellow. Starting discussion of the fiscal year 23 goals and updates. It was related to the project pipeline, so it's you and Rob would be the ones who could correct this.
Okay.
You want to put that up on the screen?
Yeah, I don't know how to do that. Sorry. Does anybody have them up here? Let me see. Do I? Basically, it says, I'll just read it for everybody here. And the goals and updates.
We have it up now.
Oh, you do? Okay, great.
So you're looking at the highlighted portions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is a rather nebulous comment there, but
Yeah.
I mean, I just went through because I had the, I think, in fact, I reviewed the pipeline because I had all of them.
Yes.
That Tom and I, just because Tom wasn't here, I mean, I read them all. I think that's what we did is we went through all the pipeline review, just like we did today. I think that's what you want to put in there.
Yeah, I think that's right. Perfect.
Okay, so is this fine then? I think that,
Well, no, I would take out Ted need to fill in details.
Yeah.
oh, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But is the sentence fine in its state?
Well, I would just add that something went through all the individual projects.
Yeah.
What items on the project pipeline?
Yeah.
Member Henry gave a synopsis of the structure and items of the project pipeline suggested by member Mead. I think that's fine. Everybody's
Member Mead and member Henry. Member Henry gave the oral thing at the thing because Tom was not there.
Yeah. Okay, so that one, I think, subject to that edit, if everybody's okay. The next one is payment. Gomer asked for motion to approve payment.
I'll double check that one. I would have access to the bill.
Cindy's, yeah, I remember it being on the lower side.
Okay.
I think, yes, I think I moved it. Yeah, and I see no reason why this is not correct. I think subject to just checking the amount.
Okay.
That's my recollection. Let's see, I think, is that it, Cindy? I think so, right?
That was all.
Yeah, so I think we can vote on it.
Anybody like to make a motion on the minutes?
I make a motion to accept the minutes.
Seconded.
Seconded, okay. And I'll do a roll call for, I think, if memory serves, the people who were here in the meeting can vote on the minutes. So why don't we start with Cindy?
Cindy Mathis and I.
Okay, and Rob?
Rob Henry, aye.
Ted Carr is an aye. And let's see, David and Tom, I think you guys were not there, correct? Yeah, okay, great. So the majority of the board has voted in favor of the minutes, so the minutes pass. Okay, and then let's see here, next up, we got, bear with me. All right, I got way too many screens open at the moment. So minutes were good. Any outstanding bills to discuss?
Not at this time.
Okay, great. Any members have any further comments? I'm sorry, I don't have the screen up. I'm having sort of issues with the video, so if you did keep away.
I think we're all shaking our heads no.
Okay, very good. Any other topics? No? I
No,
think we're
no.
all,
Negative.
all right. Why don't, I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, and can I get a second?
Second.
Second it?
Okay, and I'll just go with everybody again. So by roll call, Cindy,
Cindy Mathis and I.
okay, Rob Henry,
Rob Henry, aye.
okay, David,
David Pfeiffer, aye.
Tom,
Tom Need, aye.
and Ted Carr is an aye. Okay, Cindy and Lauren, thank you. And thank you.
Lauren, one quick question for you.
Thanks, guys.
The, I didn't have a chance to attend the planning board meeting on the 30th. I am really interested in the driveway stuff. Was that meeting recorded?